All right. So, as you guys know by now, Def Noodles and I have gotten to a bit of a quite a heated engagement. And after everything kind of hit a boiling point in our conversation that we had, I came out of it disappointed. I had a conversation with my wife, and she was like, the biggest thing that I'm upset about is the fact that you didn't actually get to talk about anything. You didn't get to go into depth about your perception on the situation with the B family, as well as the way that Dennis has, honestly, in my opinion, intentionally mischaracterized me to try to assassinate my character. And so I decided not to talk about it yesterday because I'm still frustrated by the event. And I think I'm allowed to be. And so I waited. I'm like, okay, when I do this, as frustrated as I am, it needs to be done the right way, right? I don't want this to devolve into like some kind of like a name calling contest because that's not productive. So I waited another day, and this morning I was working out, and my wife sent me this. She said, she's like, hey, she's at work, and she sent me this. She said, like, oh, you should watch, Def Noodles is the newest video. I was like, okay. So I just watched the whole thing. It's called I Quit, and there's an apology at the end, the last 5 minutes, but I still watched the whole thing. It was entertaining. I'm usually don't watch this kind of. I usually just don't listen to anything. I just walk around and I pace, like a weirdo. But yeah, it was entertaining. The video was fine. Like it wasn't bad. Like the guy's content isn't terrible or anything. And at the end, there was his apology, and at that point, I was actually taking a walk and I was listening to it and I was watching it. And I was like, okay. And I have to say, I will say, like I think it was genuine. I think it was as genuine as it could be. And what I mean by that is like, well, this just happened. There's absolutely no way that like either of the things that we have said to each other are going to completely sink in yet. It's too soon. If somebody could be completely like, wow, this is the way that I was wrong so quickly after this event, I would question them because everybody has their perspective on things. They have their moral frameworks, and it usually takes pushing to get people to change their perspective on a thing. You need to be able to process information and really, leverage that information versus your, moral foundation, and that's how you grow as a person. And I wanted to bring this up first because I am going to talk about the B family situation, the specifics about the situation that I feel like have been gotten lost that I didn't get to actually talk to Dennis about because he continuously interrupted me. I'm going to talk about the way that I do feel he genuinely tried to do deplatforming and be antagonistic towards me and really just be incredibly disingenuous. But I wanted to start it off by saying, like, I think his apology was genuine, and I don't think that he's a bad person. But if I don't think he can truly be able to get to the point of truly apologizing to me if he doesn't understand what it is about the situation that's bothering me. So this isn't like a continuation of like this, that, and the other thing. It's totally possible that he's changed some of his stances on things, but I need to express what is important to me in the situation, so that like he can go, oh shit. So that's and this is coming from somebody who's fucked up before. Like I'm not sitting here and be like, wow, you made a mistake. Fuck you. No, I've done it before too. So we're gonna go through this, and I wanted to start off with that so that you guys know that this isn't like a call to be like fuck Def Noodles and try to encourage drama because it's stupid. This is just me like really just trying to express myself to you guys, and I'm gonna go through this, and I'm gonna go through video by video. We're gonna go through my logical chain of events, etc. Okay. So this here is the first video I watched, was the B family video, and I did commentary on it. You guys know I love paint. In this first video, here's what happened. As I watched this entire thing, I crafted my perspective on what happened. You have the B family. There was an issue between the B brother and Killick. This is what happened. B family and Killick. Right? They had a confrontation, and Gabriella, I believe that's her name, was pulled into it through incredibly inappropriate comments by Killick. And I want to address why they're inappropriate. Because I feel like we understand it's wrong, but we don't understand necessarily why it's wrong. Right in here. just my bald head. It's just my bald head. Hold on. The reason why this is inappropriate, of course, is, I mean, you have a young girl being talked about in a very sexual context. But we have to understand something, that there's a greater issue. In the video game sphere, it is very acceptable to be wildly and incredibly toxic to each other. It is a boys' club. And anytime we identify any space as a boys' club, we probably need to acknowledge that that space is not good. Okay? It's like, it is really bad. We have a boys' club that's online. Now, if two young men want to be toxic towards each other, be my guest. However, you're bringing a young girl into it, and that's a problem for many reasons. First and foremost, it's just fundamentally exclusionary. It pushes women, it socializes women and girls out of video game spaces. It tells women that they just can't enjoy a thing. Because anytime you go to play video games as a girl, the second that people find out that you're a girl, you are just the target of constant harassment by a bunch of young men who probably need to touch grass most of the time. Honestly, let's be honest. And it harasses people out of the space. And it's absolutely incorrect. It's just weird. It's weird sexism, right? You're just like, yes, stay out of here, bitch. Right? And it always comes down to women and how they look and how attractive they are. And we know as a society, unfortunately, and while this is changing, but society almost exclusively values women for the way that they look. And so what you're doing and I know that they don't realize this, but what they're doing, or what Killick is doing, is he's saying, I'm going to speak down on you for the only thing that society values you on. Whereas men usually get valued on their accomplishments, women just get valued on their looks. That is changing, but that's why it's so toxic from that perspective. Another thing is that I actually sat down and talked with Killick, and this is something that I tried to express to him, and I think he understands. By the way, 17-year-old kid, incredibly mature for his age, smarter than I was, and I think he's understanding where I'm coming from. But of course, these things take time to set in. His argument is like, listen, this is between the two of us, and I was just saying that to upset her. I understand that. What you have to understand is that when you talk about somebody else, and then you say they're not allowed to have a perspective on it, you're instantly not having a fair interaction. She's allowed to be upset. We'll talk more about, like, you know, my interpretation on her being upset. Right? She's allowed to be upset. She's allowed to be frustrated. She's allowed to be angry. And you can't just exclude her from the ability to express that upset and that frustration just because it wasn't your intention to upset her. Because you did do that thing. Right? So we had these two interacting. Now, in the video, they intentionally labeled Killick as 19 years old. And this is a really big sticking point for me. Because there's no way that it could happen. It just doesn't, right? His Instagram, which was in his bio, or excuse me, his Twitter, which was in his bio, right, said that he was 16. Which, obviously, he didn't update it. The Instagram they were looking at didn't have his age in the bio, but if he had 10 pictures on there, I think, like 10 pictures, and one of them said he was 17. Either way, there's absolutely no way they could have come to the conclusion of 19 without just making it up. Now, you might say maybe the son said it. Maybe the son, maybe the B son said that he was in 19. Maybe he said it. But to me, if that's what happened, what that signals to me is that you trust your kids too much. We need to understand kids are kids. And it's not right, but kids are going to lie to you. And as a parent, it's your responsibility to go, what's the truth? We're talking about a family of content creators that understand how these things work. They understand, especially the parents, that people usually list their ages in the bio. His Twitter said 16. There's no reason to say 19. You may be giving them the benefit of the doubt, though. Okay? But I'll explain to you how that's shattered for me. So in that video, they recorrected in the description, not even in the video, but in the description later on, that he was 17 years old. However, the damage had been done. They falsely labeled him a predator, a rapist, and a pedophile, which is a massive issue. Okay? Massive. Regardless, and I'm going to talk about like issues of subconscious bias very soon, but regardless of whether you understand or think that that narrative is correct, which it may not be, but I truly feel it is. This is wrong. This is a massive overprescription of a punishment. They labeled him things that are a call to violence. And I think this is something people don't understand. As a grown man, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to make a couple of reasonable assumptions. I would go to jail to harm somebody who harms children and rapes people. Def Noodles, I think, is the same person. I think that Def Noodles is that man as well. I think most men are that man. And so there seems to be this really bizarre normalization of calling people predators on the internet. But as a real world person, that's a call to violence. And that is an absolute character assassination and completely over the top. And because of this, I think we lose the conversation about the sexualization of women just fundamentally because of how absolutely over the top we're going on this. It's a big deal, and it needs to be called out. So they mischaracterized him. They said they wanted him to get banned off YouTube. They wanted him off YouTube. They said that if he went to any other platform like Twitch or Facebook, I believe it was Facebook, they're going to follow them there and deplatform him there. They said that now it's just the sexual harassment of a 15-year-old girl. But later, he's going to become a rapist. They said these words. This is insane. And it completely overshadows the narrative of her being harassed. Because this is an absolute attempt to ruin this kid's life. This is, it's horrible. I don't know what to say. A lot of people are speculating that Gabby might have trauma, and I'm going to talk about that soon. By the way, I wish that's something that Def Noodles could have pushed me on, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you think that that's a traumatic experience for a young girl to get sexually harassed, why don't you think it's a traumatic experience for a young man to have his entire life ruined? I just need you to understand this. I understand that your first concern is her, but you have to understand that this is completely disproportionate a reaction. Okay? And they also said they were going to try to sue him for defamation. Okay? Right? So that's this video. And while I was in that video, some things struck me to be a bit racist. And historically, young black kids, young black men have been aged so that they can overprescribe punishment. Look it up. It's just a very easy thing to do. There's like, you know, black minors have a much higher chance of being tried as adults on situations. This is a thing that happens. All right? You know? When we want to put black people down, we call them boy, and we speak down to them. But when we decide that we want to push a victim, push a victim scenario, all of a sudden this black kid is a grown fucking man. And Def Noodles asked me a question, and I didn't like the framing of it because it was very black and white, and it lacked all nuance. He's like, "Do you think they're racist?" And I said, I tried to explain subconscious bias. He's like, yes or no, yes or no. And it's like, you need to stop. Because life doesn't work in yes and no's. Subconscious bias is a thing that I personally am struggling to actually understand, and it's taken a long time to understand even my way that I interact with people. And there's literally things that back this up. Listen, we have to understand. There's a study that was done that examined the the psychological. I believe they measured like their brain waves, and what it did is it showed that people of any race will perceive other people of the same race, other unfamiliar people of the same race, as more human than unfamiliar people of another race. So black people, if they see like another black stranger, will perceive them as more of a person than a white stranger. And a white person will perceive another white stranger as more human, for lack of a better term, than another white stranger. Once these people know each other, that goes away. The thing is that white people dominate the narrative in general. So the biases of white people have a much greater impact than the biases of black people. It's a very simple thing. And so you have a rich white family. I know they're Latino, but they're very white passing. You have a rich white family, and it's not, I don't doubt that they are like, oh, and they just think he's just different, that he's less than, because he's not actively he's black, he's less than, but just because of the psychological process of the way that people perceive other people that are unfamiliar. And if you're not acknowledging it, it can have like horrible implications. A lot of times, like, this is how the system works. There doesn't have to be like this act of like, we're actively against black people for black people to end up having the outcome of being treated as less than. It's a very complicated thing. And you might not understand or believe what I'm saying, but you need to understand that. Okay? That's the point that I'm coming across. Either way, it's wrong, but I do think that there's a racial motivation here. Now, in the next video that we have here, this is where we have the situation where, despite the fact that they acknowledged he's 17 in the description, they not only didn't clarify that he was 17 in that video, but they called him a grown man, despite knowing that he was a fucking minor. This is, to me, this shatters any excuse of accidentally labeling him 19 years old. Because they don't care. It just seems to be a narrative of he is an aged he's a grown man attacking my young girl. And I need you to understand something. We talked about the way that black men are overly mature, or they're pushed, they're maturized to overprescribe punishment. But we haven't talked about how the difference between black women and white women are also perceived. Black women are stereotyped as masculine and attitudey, and they are also matured when it comes to scenarios. And white women are stereotyped as damsel in distresses, innocence. Whether we actively acknowledge it or not, this is the reality. And I know that this is insensitive, but they follow this up and they reinforce this entire insane narrative that completely overshadows the good conversation of, destroying toxic video game culture by having Gabrielle cry. They have Gabrielle cry. They have a white girl cry. Now, I know that's upsetting to people, but you need to listen to this because this happens constantly, and it's happened constantly historically. I know a lot of you are like, well, that's insensitive to her, and it is. And I want to try to explain something, because I was sitting up late last night. When I tell you I was doing this, sitting there, it's like, why do people think she's traumatized? And there's two things that I come up with, right? One is I do think that on the internet, people are very exaggeratory. You see people use buzzwords and trigger words to just try to promote a narrative. They'll be incredibly hyperbolic. But I also think that when I think of trauma in a sense of like this incredibly traumatic, like PTSD experiences that are like more diagnosable. And maybe you guys are looking at this and through more of an acute trauma type of thing. Okay. We agree that it impacts her brain and it makes her upset. But the thing is, I don't think that the situation in and of itself is as impactful as her parents putting a camera on her and telling her to cry. That might be incredibly traumatic. Social media. I think that these parents are wildly irresponsible for forcing a camera onto their daughter's face and forcing her to cry. There's a moment in this video that they did where there's a cut where Gabriella is showing that she's crying without tears, right? So let me not do the quotes. She's showing that she's crying without tears, and they cut, and then she has tears. One of two scenarios are possible. The one I say is that I think it's fake. However, it's also possible that they were being so like cry to push this narrative that they actually made her cry. Right? And listen, I understand that we have different, and I wish that we could have had the conversation honestly and truthfully with a nice, genuine back and forth about this specific thing with Dennis. Honestly pressing me on why he felt this way instead of just saying it and not explaining it. Because, excuse me, I'm open to new like ideas and stuff, but like I need somebody to engage honestly and intelligently. And I'm not calling him being unintelligent. I want you to be clear. I need like I don't think he's an unintelligent guy, but our conversation became very unintelligent. And it was because of him. Okay? It became very watered down. We didn't get to the nuances of anything. Okay? I'm not calling him dumb. I don't think he's a dumb person, but we have to acknowledge that is what happened. So we have this whole thing here, right? Then we move on to here. Def Noodles made a video about it. Into my opinion, overemphasized her crying and didn't bring up the complete overreaction from the family. So I criticized it in this video here, right? Because I explain, I believe in this video, I was like, hey, here's why. Because I really feel like nobody's going to give a fuck about this kid unless it's me. Nobody cares. And it's something that, to me, I didn't even talk about this yet. This, to me, the B family, specifically the parents, are weaponizing rape and pedophilia to push a narrative to deplatform this kid. Right? He's not a rapist or a pedophile, but they're saying that he is one. That's invalidating to survivors of molestation and survivors of sexual assault, because Gabby wasn't sexually assaulted here. And I see people that are making that assertion in comments and saying that, like, oh, he might have groomed her. And it's just not the truth of the situation. Okay? It's just not the truth of the situation. Okay? And there's so many different things that are here. They're invalidating assault survivors by making this incredibly unrealistic prescription. Okay? Now, he responded, and I do believe I was most likely blunt, but I wasn't disrespectful. Okay? But his response was insane. He changed it to Papa Gut, but he said that, like, incel, slanders, blah, 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 the B family. And then he goes on to do a lot of things here. The first thing, and this is something I tried to explain to him, was the priming of his audience. Priming of your audience is you're setting somebody up to believe a thing before going into it. You're preparing somebody for the content. I brought up to Def Noodles the idea of, like, everybody does this. I talked about a situation about a vase, but I'm going to do it differently because I put a hole in the wall on accident. So yesterday, I was bringing down my Christmas tree in, like, a bag, and I dropped it and then put a hole in the wall. And I instantly said, baby, I love you. I'm really sorry. I accidentally dropped the Christmas tree. I put a hole in the wall. I primed her to have to think differently about the hole in the wall than you would think without that priming. So the intent is to be like, hey, I'm so sorry. I fucked up. Rather than her just see the hole in the wall and then make her decision. We do this all the time. Why do I have a Christmas tree? Because I just took it down in February. I'm lazy. I don't know what to tell you. Right? That's what priming is. And we have a lot of instances of priming his audience. And the biggest instance, of course, is right here. It's just it said incel originally. And I don't care about being called an incel, but it is priming. Incel is a buzzword. Calling somebody an incel is saying that, like, they hate women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know what that is. So he's priming me by calling me an incel, right? And then he completely mischaracterizes me in the entire video. Not a singular time does he bring up any of this. He doesn't even say that, like, oh, Papa Gut thinks that that the family overreacted. Doesn't even say that. Doesn't talk about it in depth of, like, oh yeah, she went too far. It is 100% reliant on this young girl crying, right? But before we even get into it, he also makes these insane, incredibly dishonest assertions. Like, for instance, I at one point said that, like, Keemstar falsely called him a pedophile. Of course, I said something along the lines of, according to Def Noodles, Keemstar called him a pedophile. And I operated as if that was the objective truth. And he criticized me for not being angry enough about it while continuously calling me a dumb fuck. I'm not upset about being called a dumb fuck. I mean, it pissed me off, let's be honest. But in an area that we agreed on, he even made it seem like we didn't agree. That is insane. That's insane. That is a mischaracterization. There was also another point where I got really frustrated because I made the point of, like, if you think that Gabby's upset about being sexually harassed, how do you think that Killick feels? Because he said people were calling him the N-word and telling him to kill himself in the comments. And Def Noodles exploded and said, well, he said he was fine. I think the reason Def Noodles did this is because he just wanted to be right. But what you need to understand is what you actually imply is that it's okay to say that black people, you can just call them the N-word and tell them to kill themselves as long as they're okay with it. Or we should just, like, you're saying that it's an okay thing to do until somebody says, please stop. Hey, you're an N-word. Kill yourself. Please stop. Oh, sorry. That's not how this works. I guarantee you he didn't think that that was what he was saying. But that is the implications of what you're saying. Like, that is the outcome of what you're saying. And I think it's really shitty for you to try to label me as a bad person for defending somebody from being called racial slurs. and told to kill themselves. You also said something to the effect that like I support abuse or something like that. Listen, we're all very flawed. People are flawed, but I've done my best to I deplatformed 2 literal fucking predators. I do my best to talk about these things. If you disagree, that's totally fine. But like, there's very little reason to assume that I'm operating in bad faith. I'm really trying. And you keep saying that you fucked up and you're a human and you're really trying. And the irony here is that I have given you tremendous benefit of the doubt because that's my experience is constantly fucking up. And so I say, you deserve the same leniency as I have gotten. But you don't pay that in kind. I also think it's very hypocritical that you are very upset that Keemstar falsely called you a pedophile. But you don't seem to be upset that Killick was falsely called a pedophile. That is cognitive dissonance. You're just applying 2 different frameworks to the same situation of getting mischaracterized as a bad thing when there's absolutely no foundation for it. So yeah, he continues to call me a dumb fuck, etc. Incredibly disrespectful. Intentionally tries to paint me out as a bad guy. Doesn't even explain what my actual issue was. I think he watched my videos to look for things that would support his narrative, and then he made the video because he thought it would be a nice, easy way to deplatform shit. Deplatform me. My response to this, by the way, this is kind of funny. Like, I just replaced myself with Keemstar. People are like, you're just like Keemstar. I'm not. I'm not a particular fan of Keemstar. Let's be honest here. We all know this. I criticize the fuck out of him. I've literally called him a rape apologist because of the disgusting rhetoric that he uses, and he knows that, and he does not like it. But it was still kind of funny. It's just silly. I take it on the fucking chin, bro. I take the entire thing on the fucking chin. Everything. I took it on the fucking chin. And I'm telling you right now, it was not an easy thing to do. Being an adult when you're not acting like one is not easy. And I took this fucking shit on the chin, bro. You were being incredibly disrespectful, incredibly rude. You were completely taking what I said out of context. You were trying to destroy me and my reputation, and I took it to the fucking chin so that I could have an actual conversation with you because this matters to me more than I matter to me. And there's no other assertion you can make because I took this on the fucking chin. And like, I'm just going to sit here and, bro, fuck you. I know that you apologize, but really, fuck you, bro. Putting me in a situation where, like, I have to take insane amounts of, like, mischaracterization and, like, destruction of my fucking, who I am and, like everything. And I had to take it on the fucking chin so that we didn't go down the dumb bullshit YouTube drama road of shouting at each other. So I'm pissed off. And it made me angry. But I took it on the chin because I'm trying to have the right conversation. I acted through this entire situation so much just more mature than you. And like, I know that you apologize. I want to bring that up because I'm not trying to deplatform. But bro, how would you feel? How would you feel? You likened me to an abuser because of this. You suggested that I was somebody that likes abuse of little girls. You effectively tried to call me a pedophile as well. And yet you claim to be so upset by Keemstar falsely accusing you of one, and yet you just seem to not care when it happens to other people. It's cognitive dissonance. It's frustrating. And like, I took it to the fucking chin, bro. I took it to the fucking chin. I know I keep repeating that. Obviously, I'm very frustrated by this, but I took it to the fucking chin. We have a larger content creator who's intentionally cherry-picking and misrepresenting a smaller content creator to weaponize their audience to try to send hate towards them. There is no other conceivable thing. You're trying to defeat me in a drama battle. That's what it is. And I know that you're sitting here apologizing, but you need to know why you're fucking apologizing. And I want to be very clear, is that like, this isn't something that's like beyond forgiveness because I think your apology was genuine and I'm bringing it up. Bringing it up because I don't want people to think I'm just trying to linger this on, but I'm allowed to be pissed off too. Yeah, I took it to the gut. So then, after that, I made this response because I was like, you know what? after you completely character assassinated me. I was afraid that you were going to continue to misrepresent me. That's why. You say that this was a dishonest tactic. Everything you did was dishonest. I said, I saw your video on me, figured I'd invite you to a chat about the B family situation. Mostly would like to talk about the incredibly harmful narrative that the B family is pushing against Killick, calling him a rapist, pedophile, and a predator, as well as them intentionally maturing him to 19. They also continued to call him a grown man in their second video after acknowledging he's a minor. It's also disappointing that you didn't mention that at all, considering that's my main issue with the subject. My lack of empathy for the 15-year-old girl is a solid point. I took that criticism, by the way, because it's a good criticism, and I'm not beyond criticism. The only difference is I took it well, and you didn't. And that's your fault. That's your flaw, and you need to work on that. And I've been there in situations where I didn't take criticism well, which is why I'm being so cordial, because I've been there, and I can empathize with the person that you are now. But I'm telling you, it's not a good person, and it needs to change, or you're not going to be a respected person or content creator. You sit here and be like, well, I'm bigger than you, fuck you. Which is some things that you were trying to say in the conversation we had. But like the reality is people respond to genuinity. We can sit here and we can shit on Ethan Klein up and down, left and right. But at the end of the day, the guy is genuine and people resonate with that. That's what it is. And if you want to be like him, you can't be like you right now. Appreciate the criticism, but when your video, I wish your video was in better faith. I reacted to your video on my stream, so it'll be up sometime soon. But it would still be nice to have a conversation with you around the areas we both got wrong, rather than to create more unnecessary YouTube drama in the commentary sphere. I made that. I put it up to protect myself. Okay? And I was ready to let this die. I was like, he's not going to respond. It is what it is. You responded with a community post that, as I read it, came off as incredibly antagonistic, dishonest, and an attempt to reinforce a character assassination against me. And I lost it. And I'm not sorry. Because you can only push so far. You pushed. Your breaking point was me criticizing you. My breaking point was you calling me a pedophile, or suggesting that I enjoy abuse of young people, that like I'm an incel, that I'm a dumb fuck, misrepresenting my entire point. That's my breaking point. It is exponentially higher than yours. Like I said, I took it to the fucking chin. I do not regret a single thing I said. I don't regret any of the passion that I had in my response. And you wholly deserved every single thing I said. Because this was the only thing that could get through to you. Because of the way that you interacted with me, that's what that showed. That this was the only thing that you respond to. And that's my genuine frustration. So I responded and I explained to everything that like you were wrong about, the way that you misrepresented me, and I fucking gave you shit. And I don't even think you watched it. I think that you said that you didn't watch it yet in our conversation. That's not a criticism, but I'm just telling you right now, I don't regret any of it. Then we got to our conversation. The conversation was an absolute fucking shit show because of you, not because of me. I was incredibly respectful. I offered this offline or online because, again, this was what mattered to me. I showed the DM in the conversation because you tried to say like, oh, you just wanted to get me on your platform. We could have done it offline. And then you stumbled around and you were like, well, and then after, this seemed to be what you did, is you just keep steamrolling me. And then eventually like, well, you'll just cherry pick the information. And Def Noodles, whether you like it or not, that's your content, is cherry picking information and applying it. That's an okay thing to do if you are somebody who's trustworthy. But based on the way that you treated me, you're not trustworthy to me. You cherry picked and you completely misinformed your audience on me so that you can get a quick win and you could try to move on. And it just didn't work. Right? And we never got to talk about what really mattered. Instead, this whole conversation devolved. You wouldn't let me get a singular word in here. At one point, you brought up the things that I did wrong in the past, which is ironic because you're so desperate to say that you're wrong and move on. But you wouldn't apply that to me. And when I tried to talk about my failures as a content creator, which I do constantly, you completely derailed me. I had to wait like 5 or 7 minutes, I think. I don't remember the exact. Just to be like, hey, this is important to talk about. as my failures. And you decided to liken everything to a joke. Def Noodles. That's an incel behavior. Okay? Doing something wrong and then saying it was just a joke is not comedy. Okay? There absolutely is the misinterpretation of jokes. And we even talked about that because I made jokes that were misinterpreted and they were still wrong. Because it's not just, and this is something that you still don't understand, it's not just about what you say. As a large content creator, you also have to understand it's about how people perceive that information. You are responsible for the way that people perceive your information. If 90% of people perceive your information in the way that you push it out there, you did a good job. If 10% of the people perceive the information in the way that you put out there, you failed as a content creator. Nobody looked at it as a comedic response, and frankly, nobody follows you because you're a comedian. This isn't a shot. I'm not saying you're not funny, but your channel here is a news channel. I'm not saying you're not funny, but it's like a drama news channel. It's not a comedy channel. You even said it's a comedy channel. Everybody knows that. Nobody reflected that it was a comedy channel in your comments in any capacity. And you even tried to say that you put jokes and satire tags and all this other bullshit on the video. And I said, no, you don't. You said, oops, I guess I forgot. Dishonest framework. You're using comedy as an excuse to be a bully. The difference is you did to a grown man that defended himself. It's not a positive behavior to disrespect and assassinate people's character and say, just kidding. It's not funny. You know why I know it's not funny? Because Keemstar did that to you. When he put up the thing calling you a pedophile, it was a joke because you would pass around a bunch of misinformation. Right? You've been called out by tons of content creators for this. Right? One of the things I saw was that anytime anybody that said like, oh, James Charles, another individual James Charles had an inappropriate interaction with, they would come and say, I did, oh, look, another person, but it turned out they were lying. Like somebody would be like, hey, on TikTok, I had an inappropriate interaction with James Charles. And then the next day they said that they were lying and you pushed it as facts. And I understand making mistakes. And Keemstar made a joke about calling you a pedophile. It doesn't matter if it's a joke or not. It doesn't matter if Keemstar said it was a joke. And I told him this in DMs. I'm telling you right now, because I told him that it's not something that you joke about because it's a call to violence. Right? It's not okay to say something is a joke because your logic defends Killick. You need to understand your logic defends Killick and it defends Keemstar. That's insane. Your logic of I can say whatever I want as long as I say it's a joke defends Killick and Keemstar's inappropriate behavior. You are being morally inconsistent. You need to understand that is a fundamental character flaw of you, applying different sets of rules to you versus other people. Your moral framework ironically defends Keemstar's inappropriate behavior because everything's a fucking joke. Everything's a joke as long as I say so. That's not how the world interacts. And I don't know how you still think that that's a valid thing to say. Because it's just not appropriate. And we didn't get to talk about that. And it's a big fucking deal. You constantly kept saying that I was upset by being called an incel. I don't understand why. Because I don't care. I care about your framing. Because I brought up your dishonest in framing, you kept saying, oh, you want me to change the incel thing? I made it very clear I just wanted my perspective represented, not even me. You didn't even have to mention me in any of your videos. I made that clear. I just want the perspective that the B family overreacted to be in those videos because that's the important message. And you decided to just remove it and change the incel thing. That just is a completely dishonest representation of myself in the moment. It's insane. What you did was incredibly disrespectful. And as me, a newer content creator, you as a more established content creator are signaling to people that this behavior is okay for every single content creator moving forward. You can't criticize other smaller commentary channels on behavior that you are exhibiting. You are not setting a positive example. You're doing the wrong thing. in the way that you characterize me. It's just the facts of the situation. And it's frustrating. Right? And that's really what I wanted to I really wanted to reinforce this. And even after that performative apology to me, you made another video saying a Twitch streamer gets offended I call him an incel. You continue with the incorrect framing of the situation. And the thing that bothered me again was your priming of your audience before the debate in an attempt to reinforce a character assassination before the debate was shown. If you notice, I put up the entire debate. Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing? From start to finish, and I reflect at the end in incredibly good faith. Incredibly. I give you so many concessions in the benefit of the doubt, beyond what you deserve. Because I'm trying to do the right thing. And I'm fucking angry. And I want to believe you're a fucking worthless person, but I just don't. I'm not trying to say you are one. I'm saying like the way that you have interacted and spoken about me, you effectively called me like a fucking supporter of abuse and all these horrible fucking things. The only thing that I should think is like, this guy's fucking worthless and I should never engage with you a single time in my entire life. And I didn't. And you want to know what the outcome was? A genuine fucking apology. The outcome of me taking it to the fucking chin and giving you tremendous benefit of the doubt is an apology. It is an actual first step to positive discourse. This was what I wanted the whole time. That's it. I wanted just respect and to just fucking listen to a very important thing that we were talking about. And it worked. But again, in this video here, you did the same thing that you said that you apologized for in our conversation before you showed it. You completely harped on that me just talking shit about this 15-year-old girl. Even though you wouldn't engage in the conversation in a deep way, talking about like you could have sat here and said like, you know what, trauma is different for everybody. There's the impact of the internet weighing in on the situation. There's social pressures. There's so many things you could have said that you didn't say because you aren't invested in your own argument. I sat here and I read through comments of people saying I was wrong about this. And I was like, why am I wrong? And I actually went and I looked at things and I still don't think that I'm wrong. I don't think that she's traumatized, but I could be wrong. I'm doing your job by trying to understand why people feel this way because we're all different people and we're all interacting and I have a perspective. I'm doing more work for your argument about this girl than you did. I'm really trying. It's a fucking damn shame. And to me, the fact that you didn't even put any energy into thinking about like, well, why is it trauma? The fact that you didn't put any energy into that makes me feel like you don't really care. And I don't want to think that because again, you had a genuine apology to me, but it makes me feel that way, man. And I don't like people saying, well, he's just not educated on debates. He just said a debate. No, shut up. This wasn't a debate. I didn't press you. I barely pressed you on anything. I was so nice. This was such a good faith conversation. I was so nice and I was so fucking like, I was so generous to you. And this idea that like, oh, maybe they need to be a moderator. There doesn't need to be a moderator when two grown men sit down together and have an honest conversation. But you didn't act like a grown man. And that's the reality, man. And then you continue to exhibit the same behavior. You calling me an incel again. Right? Which I don't care about the incel thing, but you see how you're just continuously engaging in the things that I said that was wrong, and you're saying you're sorry in the beginning of the debate, but it comes off as you're just trying to say you're sorry to get ahead of everything so that you can be like, well, I said I'm sorry, so you can't criticize me. That sounds exactly like what you're doing. And that's reinforced by you just continuing the inappropriate behavior after the fact. You didn't learn anything after our conversation until you got massive public backlash that said you're fucking wrong. And you sat down and those things just beat the shit out of you until you're like, maybe I actually am wrong. It took people seeing the truth before you for you to see the truth yourself. Okay? And it all wraps up with the outcome of like the clickbait. I went. Outcome of what I believe is a genuine apology. Reinforcing this because I appreciate it and I want to accept it. And I think I do, but I'm still frustrated. And that's it. I'm still frustrated, and I'm going to continue to be frustrated. And I don't want to talk to you. I don't want any more interact. If you decide to respond and it's another bullshit, you're an incel nonsense, I will lose all respect for you, and you will go down as the most worthless person that I've ever met on social media. If you want to respond, be my guest, but if you continue the disrespectful tactics, it's over. And you can sit here and be like, I don't care, I'm a big channel. People are going to respond to this, and people are going to disconnect from you, and people are just going to see that you're not being honest. That's what's going to happen. You need to stop acting like your audience are a bunch of dumb fuck sheep that will just believe anything you say, and you need to respect them and understand that there's people with particular perspectives. And like, if you continue to abuse your platform in trying to deplatform other people instead of doing the right thing, they're going to disconnect from you, and they're not going to think that you're worth anything. And a year from now is going to be a very different place. And a year from now, I would love if we were on good terms. I'd love if we were on good terms. That's it. I consider everybody on this platform like coworkers to an extent. The things that I've covered and talked about are incredibly horrific and abusive. And some of the situations that I've inserted myself in, talk about content creators like Glendon Cameron, somebody who's admitted to fucking raping people. Insane shit. A guy who sat down and was like, yeah, I would talk to girls on when I was like 35 years old or in my 30s. I would go on Craigslist and I would find young girls that were under the age of 18, and I would just make sure they had bad family lives so the families wouldn't call the police, and I would fuck them. That's a bad person, Def Noodles. You're somebody that I like to think is a good person doing bad things. Okay? And this whole weird thing of you're just assuming this and you're just assuming that. Like, you're just assuming the B family did it on purpose. This is a reasonable assumption that I have outlined. Called him 19. When they corrected that he was 17, they continued to call him a grown man. It's not an unreasonable assumption to say what's in their heart is hatred, and I think it's hatred for black people. And I think that, unfortunately, the parents are more interested in deplatforming this young black man than in the future trying to protect their daughter from actual harassment. That's what I get out of this. That's what I get out of this. It's incredibly unfortunate that the overwhelming majority of large content creators on these platforms seem to think that they're above criticism and that they're better than everybody else, because they know that even if they're wrong, they can use their platform to just completely deplatform other people. And while I'm not the smallest content creator out there, bro, this proves that, like you said in this video here, there are checks and balances. And I'm part of that checks and balances system. Somebody who's morally consistent, who owns up to his own problems, who owns up to his own shit, who makes honest content, who calls people out for dishonest behavior. That's the checks and balance system. And by the way, like I said, this episode was pretty entertaining. Maybe in the future we could be mutual subs. I don't know. But right now, I'm not in the headspace to extend any more benefit of the doubt to you. So, but I'm sure that can change in the future as the situation moves on. And that's what I wanted to say in this segment here. So yeah, hopefully that can be received well, and we can move on from there. But I really just needed to get that out. I really just needed to get out that entire... I needed to be able to express that frustration. So, hooray for me.